How do prisoners get so jacked when they have no equipment and they can't even get in enough protein? It might sound unbelievable, but even with all those restrictions, they have still found methods that have them looking way better than the average gym goer. And today we will look into those methods and see which ones you should start doing to achieve that incredible looking physique. One of the first things that crosses people's minds when the conversation is about how jacked the prisoners are is PEDs. Because it really wouldn't be unusual for someone in prison to take PEDs, right? And yeah, of course, some have super insane physiques because of that, there is no doubt. But really, smuggling anything into prison, and especially something like PEDs, has to be really expensive. At least I think so, because I have obviously never been in prison. But with these thumbnails I have been making lately, that might be changing very soon. Who knows? So while PEDs could definitely be the reason behind some of the insane physiques, realistically only a very few people can actually afford it. You know, if everyone had easy access to PEDs, we wouldn't really have any secrets to uncover. But we actually do. Because some of the things these guys do in there will completely change your perspective on everything you might have ever thought about working out. Before we get to the truly incredible training methods and exercises, we first have to talk about protein. After all, prison is not a 5-star hotel. So how can they get so jacked when they have to eat what they get served? Well, while 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight is the amount that will help you completely maximize muscle gain, you can get away with way less and still build a lot of muscle. It will not be the maximum amount you could, but it will still be a good amount. So instead of the 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight, you could even get away with something like a half of that. Will it give you the best results in the world? No, but you will be still able to build muscle. And it's not like you have a choice when you are in prison. And if you look at the physiques of some of the prisoners, you can see that the protein amount really didn't stop them. And from what I have been able to find, you can actually get a decent amount of protein from the prison meals. It surely differs from country to country, but something like beans, for example, seem to be the staple all over the world. And beans do have a pretty good protein amount, and the protein quality is also pretty decent. What also seems to be very prominent is peanut butter and different types of canned fish. So it is definitely possible to get at least 0.5 grams of protein per pound of body weight. Because you can actually buy more food if you have the money or if you got a job in the kitchen. So if you really wanted, you could up your protein intake a decent amount. And I can imagine that if I was in prison, I would definitely try to get as much protein as possible. Because what else are you gonna do in there except build more muscle? Might as well get insanely jacked, there is nothing else to do anyway. While nutrition is certainly important, the magic really happens when it comes to training. And because prisoners do not have access to the gym, let alone to a single dumbbell, they heavily rely on the basic bodyweight exercises. Well, at least in the US, if you get imprisoned in a country like Sweden, you probably have a workout in a 5-star gym and then go play tennis on your private tennis court. Exercises like push-ups, pull-ups, squats and sit-ups are the bread and butter. Plus there is one insanely effective cardio exercise that is absolutely incredible, but more on that later. You can easily do any of these exercises without any equipment, except the pull-ups I guess, because while it is possible to do pull-ups with no equipment, it is certainly not as easy as the other exercises. Pull-ups are usually done by holding onto some kind of ledge in your prison cell, which really doesn't sound very enjoyable, but if it's the only option you got, you take it. That's kind of the prison theme. But the problem with these exercises is that after a very short moment, you will be able to spam an insane amount of repetitions without much challenge. And because there are no weights that you can add on, you have to get creative. Because Progressive Overload doesn't care if you are in a luxury gym or in a prison cell. You still need to improve over time, no matter what the situation is. Luckily, there is a surprisingly large amount of ways in which you can progressively overload without needing to add more weight. So let's talk about them, and you will definitely be able to apply all of these types of progressive overload even if you are not in prison. So pay attention, because it might come in handy if we have some pandemic again in the future, and you will end up being forced to work out at home with no equipment. Let's start with the most impactful method that is a complete game changer. And that is the lengthened partial. If this word combination didn't really tell you what this is in practice, don't worry. People doing it in prison also have no idea how it is called, but they do it because they know it works so incredibly well. So instead of telling you how scientifically amazing it is, let me just tell you why the prisoners are doing it in the first place. And spoiler alert, it's not because they read a scientific paper about it. The lengthened partial is basically a half repetition, where you only perform the bottom half of the movement where the muscle is fully stretched. So if we take take the push-up for example, you only move halfway up from the ground and then go back down again. You never fully lock out. But why would you do this? Well, to an untrained eye, watching a video of a prisoner doing the lengthened partial might seem like they are just lazy and know nothing about training, because they can't even do one full repetition. But it's actually the exact opposite, because in this scenario, you would be the fool. Let me ask you, when you do push-ups, what is the limiting factor? Is it your chest? No. Is it your triceps? Yes. And when does the triceps get fatigued the most when you do push-ups? Exactly, in the top half of the repetition. So instead of doing, let's say, 30 full range of motion push-ups and then needing to stop because your triceps are completely fried, you can do way more reps if you only perform the bottom half of the repetition. And sure, you can say, of course you can do more reps when you only do a half rep each time, but it's not about the number of reps being higher. That actually doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. Prisoners do thousands, yes, thousands of push-ups every day. When dealing with numbers like that, it really doesn't matter. What the lengthened partial allows you to do in this scenario is actually build your chest. You don't want the triceps to limit the amount of work that you can do. You ideally want to put yourself in a spot where the chest and the triceps reach failure at the same time. Because when it comes to super high volume push-ups in full range of motion, your triceps is always gonna fail way before your chest ever starts to get any meaningful overload. That's why the lengthened partial is so incredible. And you can think about it what you want, but doing the quote-unquote half reps is definitely not easy. You can give it a shot and you will see that it's way more difficult than doing regular full range of motion push-ups. Only after you try it, you will realize that you don't get that small millisecond of rest at the top of the rep. Going only halfway up just puts you in a pressure cooker of constant tension that is about to cook some delicious gains. And it doesn't have to be just bodyweight exercises. You can easily apply this to any of your favorite gym exercises. For example, if you are doing the machine chest press, then after finishing your regular repetitions for that set, you can do a couple of lengthened partials to finish off the set. Doing something like that is gonna help you get so much more out of your chest, because even if you are incapable of doing another full rep, you can still at least squeeze out a couple of partial ones. Just keep in mind that when you take this method from the prison environment where they do thousands of reps, and you apply it to some gym exercise which actually provides the needed resistance, the lengthened partial will cause a lot of extra fatigue. So if you overdo it, you might wake up feeling like you just dropped your soap in prison. But there are many other training modifications prisoners use to make exercises more difficult. Like for example, increasing the difficulty of the basic exercise by slightly changing the variation, which is a form of progressive overload. Like for example, going from a basic push-up to a decline push-up. Each exercise has a lot of adjustments that you can make, so this is one of the easiest ways of making the exercise more difficult and challenging your muscles even more once again, while also giving you something new to do, which I can imagine can be pretty huge when you are stuck in prison for years doing the same exact thing every single day, which is also probably the reason why many people start working out in prison, even if they have never worked out before, because if you have to sit in your cell almost 24 hours a day, you gotta find something to occupy your mind, otherwise you will just go nuts. Probably the simplest method prisoners use to make exercises more challenging is to let another inmate create the resistance. For example, when doing the bodyweight squat, you can take someone on your shoulders and do squats that way, and you instantly have a much more challenging exercise. But what seems to be the most popular style of exercising is working out in a group, or at least with one partner. For that, they utilize the I go, you go system, where the rest period is dictated by how long it takes your partner to finish their set. Let's say that you and I are doing push-ups together in a cell. I start and do 10 push-ups. As soon as I'm done, you do 10 push-ups. And while you are doing those 10 push-ups, I am resting. And then again, after you are done with those 10 push-ups, I begin my 10 push-ups while you rest. And it continues in this exact style. This is not only a great style of working out, but it also gives you the motivation to push yourself. Because if you take too long, the other person has to keep on waiting on you until you finish the set. Because that's how the system works. You can't do another set until you finish yours. And you don't want to let anyone down. And now imagine this in like a big group of people. There is no way that you would want to be the person everyone has to wait on. The motivation from this is so insane that even if you are completely exhausted, you would still finish the set. These group workouts workouts help them stay accountable. Plus, that's how you accumulate a ton of overall volume. Because even if you use some of the training modifications to make some of the basic exercises harder, given long enough time, you will just be able to do a ton of repetitions. And to continuously build muscle, even if you are already doing the most difficult variation, is to just do more and more training volume. And the best way of doing that is to spread out your workouts across the entire day. The prisoners are basically doing the grease the groove method, where they don't really have just one dedicated workout, they basically work out throughout the entire day in smaller blocks. That way, at the end of the day, they can have an insane amount of workload accumulated. When you see an interview with some guy who used to be in prison say something like, "I did 2000 push-ups every day," do you think he did it in one session? Probably not. The vast majority of people doing thousands of push-ups or thousands of reps of any other exercise, for sure that it's spread out across an entire day, as that is both more effective and it also gives you something to do throughout the day without going insane, which is probably way more important to the prisoners than whether or not it's going to build less or more muscle. Now let's finally talk about the exercise that is responsible for the infamous prisoner physique, and that is the burpee. This burns an insane amount of calories and is the sole reason why if you see a ripped prisoner with a six-pack looking lean and mean, it's probably because he has done an insane amount of burpees. I personally am a massive fan of burpees. When the weather is reasonable, I go rocking all the time, but when it starts to get really cold, the burpees are my absolute go-to. And if you are fed up with being overweight and you really want to make a drastic change, start doing burpees. Just a couple of reps each day and increase that over time, and you will be absolutely amazed by the results. But with that being said, even those couple of reps might be extremely difficult if you are out of shape. But once you get going, you will never look back. When I told you about the I Go You Go system, this is how burpees are usually done in prison. And I have tremendous respect for the level of conditioning those guys have. Imagine doing burpees in the I Go You Go system for like an hour straight. That is probably the closest you will ever get to experiencing how hell really feels like. And that is kind of how getting jacked in prison can be summed up. These people have basically infinite time, so they can just focus on training, eating and sleeping, which just proves once again how powerful the simplest of basics are. And if you want to get as jacked as them, you don't have to go to prison. This basically just shows you how many effective training methods are out there, even if you have literally no equipment at all. You know what they say, where there is a will, there is a way. But the difference between a prisoner and a regular Joe who just wants to build muscle is in the approach, because the prisoner has nothing better to do, so he just sticks to his routine. But the average Joe today could procrastinate in so many ways, or just always find some excuse to not stay accountable. For example, if you want a massive bag, do the grease the groove method on pull-ups. I did that way back then, and not only did my pull-up count completely skyrocket, but I got the best back gains of my life. And I'm being 100% serious. Will it take you a lot of effort because you will have to have multiple smaller pull-up workouts throughout the day? Yes, it will, and it might feel never-ending on some days. But if you want a really impressive physique, then you have to put in the effort. It's just not being given away for free just because you step a foot in the gym. Because if you want something bad enough, you can always find a way. And don't tell me that something is impossible, you have just not tried hard enough. If people with literally nothing can achieve an impressive physique, then you can do it too. You just need to give it a serious try. For that, I would recommend you to check out the Beginner Bundle, which is heavily based on the basics that give you the foundation you need to succeed. It comes with a training, nutrition and a cardio plan, and also a detailed technique guide for all the basic exercises, so you cover all your bases. And everything progresses over time, so you don't have to worry about getting overwhelmed right on the first day. Because I know how it feels when you are getting into something as a beginner and everything seems super overwhelming. I have been there. That's why this is the guide that you will finish, because if you can't finish this, then you will not be able to finish anything else ever. That's how confident I am that this will help you stick to the gym for good. You can check it out by clicking the first link below. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time. If you liked this video, then you will surely like this one too.